Snow White and the Queen. Snow White and the Queen. Focus question. How do the Queen's choices guide the plot? Once upon a time, there lived the King and Queen who longed for a baby. One winter day, as the Queen sat sewing by an open window, she pricked her finger with her needle. 2 drops of blood fell and landed on the snow. The Queen noticed it, how striking the circlet blood appeared against the dazzling white, all surrounded by an ebony window frame. I want a girl with skin as white as snow, lips as red as blood, and hair as black as ebony, she wished aloud. Not long afterward, the King and Queen had a baby girl just as the Queen had envisioned. The girl's skin was as white as winter snow, so they named her Snow White. When the girl was still an infant, the young Queen died. The King was grief-stricken, but eventually his loneliness led him to a new life. The new Queen was very beautiful and spent many hours preening before an enormous ornate golden mirror. She became obsessed with her appearance and cast an enchantment upon her beloved mirror. Mirror, you must reveal anything I wish to know and never, ever lie, the Queen commanded. The mirror shimmered in response. Who is the most beautiful in all the world? The Queen asked. You are the most beautiful, my Queen, the mirror replied, and the Queen sighed with satisfaction. Each time she asked, the mirror answered the same, and each time the Queen was soothed and reassured for a while. Years passed in peace, but when Snow White turned 16, the Queen inquired again, Who is the most beautiful in all the world? The mirror shimmered and held its silence. The Queen hissed, You know that, you cannot lie. Snow White is the most beautiful, admitted the mirror. The Queen blazed with envy, but knowing the King adored his daughter, she defied it for a time. Later that year, however, the King was called away to war. The very day he departed, the Queen summoned a hunter to the palace. Take this girl into the forest, she spat, shoving Snow White toward him, and kill her. The hunter knew the Queen was cruel to servants who disobeyed, so with a heavy heart he ushered the girl deep into the woods. Please, begged Snow White, if you let me leave, I will stay in the forest and never return. The hunter could not bear to harm Snow White, so he let her escape, assuming wild animals would soon complete the job that he could not. Snow White fled through the undergrowth alone and afraid, just as her strength ebbed and her fingers stiffened with cold. She spied a curious little cottage with a wisp of smoke rising from its chimney. Inside was a table with 7 chairs, 7 plates, and 7 goblets, though no one appeared to be home. In the next room, she found 7 little beds. Exhausted, she crawled up on one and soon fell asleep. When Snow White awoke, she was surrounded by 7 men, all in heavy work clothes, all smiling kindly, and all about half her size. Don't be afraid, one said. You are merely miners who spend each day tunneling for gold in the mountains. And who might you be? When Snow White explained who she was and told them about the Queen, the dwarfs grew grave. You can hide here as long as you wish, but if the Queen learns that you are alive, she may come for you yet. Another dwarf warned Snow White. When we are away, never let anyone in. Meanwhile, as soon as the hunter returned to the palace alone, the Queen rushed to her mirror. Who is the most beautiful in all the world? She demanded. The mirror shuddered, and the Queen's eyes narrowed. Snow White, hiding with the dwarfs in the mountains, is still the most beautiful, the mirror finally replied. The Queen grew seated with envy and could not rest while the girl was still alive. Disguising herself as an old peddler, the Queen collected a bag of ribbons and buttons. They set out through the forest. When she reached the dwarf's cottage, she called out, Pretty things for sale. Snow White picked out. I must not let anyone in, she explained, for the dwarfs were gone. Then come out and look, the peddler coaxed, holding up a red ribbon that shimmered like a ruby against Snow White's skin. I suppose I could, Snow White said hesitantly. The moment Snow White stepped outside, the queen cinched the ribbon so tightly around the girl's throat that she suffocated her. Soon Snow White fell to the ground, lifeless. The queen sped home to her golden mirror. Who is the most beautiful in the world? She panted. You are the most beautiful, my queen, said the mirror. With that, the queen's red-hot rage finally dissipated. When the dwarfs returned home, they found Snow White lying there, pale and motionless. They cut the ruby ribbon. With a choking gasp, Snow White awoke. This is the work of the queen, the dwarfs warned. Never let anyone in and never accept anything from anyone. Weeks later, still confident that Snow White was dead, the queen addressed her mirror. Who is the most beautiful in all the world? She asked. Snow White, revived by the dwarfs, is the most beautiful, the mirror answered. The queen's throat tightened. Drawing open her skill with potions, she crafted a poisoned apple, then uttered a clever incantation that made the red half deadly but the green half safe. She disguised herself as an old farmer and set back out across the mountains. As soon as Snow White saw someone approaching, she latched the shutters and barred the door. Are you afraid of me, child? The farmer laughed. I've only come to sell apples. I must not let anyone in, Snow White said. I don't need to come in, dear. You can look from the window, the woman said. I cannot accept anything either. It's it's a shame, the farmer said, sounding genuinely disappointed. As this year's crop is especially delicious, she sliced an apple in half and took a big bite. The sound of the crisp fruit made Snow White's mouth water. She opened the door a crack and saw the farmer contentedly chewing. Maybe I could try one apple, but it must be that one, the one you are safely eating, Snow White said. Of course, the farmer smiled, handing the red half to Snow White. When the first bite of poisoned apple lodged in Snow White's throat, the world drained of sound and color, and she collapsed to the ground. The queen dashed back to her beloved mirror. Who is the most beautiful in all the world? She pleaded. You are the most beautiful, the mirror replied, and relief washed over the queen's troubled heart. When the dwarfs saw their door ajar, they rushed inside and found Snow White lying there she had fallen. There were no ribbons they might untangle and no wounds they might heal. She was cold. She was dead. The dwarfs could not bear to bury Snow White, so they constructed a delicate coffin of golden glass and laid her to rest on a mountainside. Snow White appeared merely asleep, as beautiful as ever. Months later, the dwarfs spotted the king's party returning from war. We should bring poor Snow White back to her father, the dwarfs declared, since the queen cannot hurt her anymore. The 7 dwarfs gently bore the glass coffin through the forest. At the palace, the king reunited with his queen, who seemed uncommonly serene. And where's my daughter? The king asked. Our sweet Snow White ran away, the queen said, shedding very real-looking tears. Just then, the dwarfs arrived at the palace, carrying the glass coffin with Snow White inside. Sobbing, the king lifted her daughter from the coffin. She embarrassed her so fiercely that the apple in her throat was dislodged. Snow White's eyelids fluttered. She was alive. The king and the dwarfs were so overjoyed that they did not notice the queen flying up the palace steps to her chamber in a blind rage. She would never be the most beautiful as long as Snow White lived. Unless... Who is the most beautiful in all the world? She demanded of the mirror. Snow White... No! The queen exploded. I am the most beautiful. I am! Tell me that I am the most beautiful! My queen, I cannot lie. And Snow White is the most... No! Screamed the queen. I am the most beautiful. And you will tell me so. The mirror she dread. For the final time, tell me, the queen shrieked. The mirror rubbed like water and cracked like ice. My queen, it began, but the queen's spell was too strong and the mirror could not lie. The mirror shattered, sending shards of glass flying in all directions. One shard flew straight into the queen's heart, killing her. With the jealous queen gone forever, Snow White was safe at last. The king offered to reward the dwarfs, but they asked only that Snow White visit their mountain cottage now and then. Snow White and the king were glad to oblige, and all of them lived happily ever after.